Industry and Competition Minister Parks Tau says Cabinet has approved that South Africa submit a revised offer as a basis for negotiations with the US. Tau says the new offer is expected to be submitted today, and he mentioned a couple of industries that have been affected and how this anatomy of cooperation, trade cooperation between us and the US will work. One of those sectors is the poultry sector. Let's talk to the CEO of the Broiler Organisation of the South African Poultry Association, Izaak Breitenbach. Izaak, good morning to you. Welcome. I'm sure that you were watching that news conference along with us. What is your reaction as an organisation to that briefing? Has anything changed?
No, we don't actually know what was being offered to the Americans. What we do know is that America asked for 120,000 tons of poultry meat to enter the country free of the anti-dumping duty. That has been up for discussion for a long period of time. And the South African poultry industry actually opposed that. And reason being that we have suffered since 2015 with 65,000 tons of chicken meat per annum being imported into South Africa, excluding the anti-dumping tariff. And that has hurt the industry.
All right, so what we heard among some of the things that he said is that the US would continue to benefit from the 72,000-ton poultry quota under the conditional self-lifting system. And it sounds then, as you're saying, that this doesn't allay any of your concerns that you've also had historically about this. The simplification that he talked about, does it risk loosening the safeguards that are in place and making it easier for the US producers to continue to flood the South African market then?
Correct. There are two issues here. The first issue that you mentioned is the one that they can self-regulate in terms of highly pathogenic avian influenza, meaning that when they do get the disease, they can decide when they stop exports to South Africa. And secondly, when they are free of the disease, they can decide when they want to export to South Africa. Now, that is of concern to us. The reason being that we can't have America deciding or controlling highly pathogenic avian influenza in South Africa. So that is of concern. The amount of 72,000 tons that you've mentioned of imports of chicken meat from the US to South Africa is problematic. Pre-2019, the industry was in distress. The industry became smaller and smaller every single year. Imports made out a bigger portion of the industry year on year. And the industry really suffered at the time. And the root cause of this was dumping of chicken meat into South Africa. Now, if we import chicken meat exclusive of the anti-dumping duty, excluding the anti-dumping duty, then it means that we allow for dumped meat to come into South Africa. Now, we can't go back to that period of time when the industry was in distress. This is an important industry. This industry needs to create economic growth. It's the second largest industry in agriculture. We have we've got 58,000 people employed in the industry. We can't sacrifice that for imports.
I want to get a little bit more into the dumping issue, but I think it's worth Izaak just explaining to our viewers what dumping is in the global and particularly the South African context.
Iman, yes, the definition is actually quite simple. Dumping is not allowed by the World Trade Organization, a reason being that dumping causes the recipient country harm. And when we got the anti-dumping duty against the US, at the time, which was the second biggest country dumping into South Africa, we stopped that because we proved material harm to the industry. Dumping means that when America sells product in South Africa at a cheaper price than they sell in America, that constitutes dumping. And that is simply not allowed or not favored by the World Trade Organization.
So the minister mentioned using anti-dumping and safeguard measures if the imports begin to surge. But these are often reactive tools. It kicks in, and one would say it kicks in only after the damage has done. Do you believe that our government's response time will be fast enough to prevent job losses before they occur?
Of concern, because to get an anti-dumping duty is a whole process, and it takes about a year to 2 years to actually get an anti-dumping duty. So it is of concern when the ministers, without speaking to the industry, and we've reached out to Minister Tau on several occasions, to date, he's got letters on his desk where the industry asks for consultation with the industry, and it doesn't happen. We met with Minister Tau on the 16th of May, and actually at that time, he agreed that he would speak to the industry before any concessions relating to poultry will be made. So this is of concern.
So what, you guys feel locked out of the conversation?
Absolutely locked out of the conversation, although we've had an agreement on the 16th of May that Minister Tau will consult with us before any concessions are made. The only place where we hear about this is in the media. And that is not the right way to do it. We would like to speak to Minister Tau.
One of the other things you've called for previously, Izaak, is an urgent revocation of U.S. poultry imports or the import quota. So we heard today in that news conference there were assurances on biosecurity compliance, still broader negotiations and so on. So I want to ask whether you still see revocation as the only viable option. I mean, remember, we're in a context where we're trying to do a quid pro quo arrangement so that we don't trigger a trade retaliation from the U.S.
Absolutely correct. If we look at the AGOA agreement of 2015, the poultry industry was sacrificed to be able to get duty-free access to the US for motor vehicles, for steel, and certain agricultural products like citrus. So we've paid our price. We have been at the receiving end of these duties for a long period of time. And we're certainly an industry where the industry needs to be looked after. We can't have an industry being exposed to dumping from America. If we look at dumping, we currently have 9 anti-dumping duties against different countries. And that is of huge concern because all these countries were dumping pre-2019 in South Africa. And that caused material economic harm to the industry to such an extent that the industry did not make enough money to reinvest in the industry. We don't want that again.
And those are concerning, as you say, historic concerns as well around dumping and the survival or the resilience of South African poultry farmers. Let's talk about long-term sustainability. One of the ideas that has been workshopped, it's been talked about, was the need now for South Africa to diversify its market in a number of different sectors. And this new strategy also prioritizes markets in Asia, in the Middle East, and in Africa. We know that it will take time to secure. How do poultry producers and organizations such as yourselves realistically benefit from a plan like this if these domestic protections are weakened and we lose our capacity even before we are able to secure these new markets?
Since pre-2019, we were not really geared for exports, and specifically exports of cooked product, cooked chicken meat. But we, as an industry, have invested since 2019 in cooking facilities in the industry. We've got ample cooking facilities available now, and we've actually applied for export status to the UK, as well as the European Union, and also Saudi Arabia. The UK has already visited South Africa. They inspected our facilities, and we are awaiting an outcome or a decision on whether we can export cooked poultry products to the UK. The process in terms of the EU and Saudi Arabia is fully with the Department of Agriculture at the moment. The Department of Agriculture needs to request these countries to come and inspect South Africa. We are in continuous talks with the Department of Agriculture relating to that. And I'll be disappointed if we don't export chicken meat by the end of the year. But having said that, if we look at South Africa, we have 15 to 20% of total chicken consumed imported. America, 1%. European Union, 7%. Brazil, 1%. So they work extremely hard to keep our exports out of their particular countries.
So what's your biggest concern this morning then, given, some of the issues are historic, as we've just discussed, and some of what has been put on the table now doesn't really dig you out of a hole necessarily as a sector?
No, I don't have too big concerns. As I said, we've done a lot of work since 2019 in terms of preparing the country for exports of chicken meat. And we've already had our first inspection, and we just need to do get two more inspections done, one by the European Union and one by Saudi Arabia. And that will change the total outlook for chicken meat in South Africa. That's a strategic decision that we've made, an important one to improve the macroeconomic environment of the industry, and I believe that that will be successful.
Well, it's wonderful to hear that your wings will not be clipped, Izaak, at least in the short to medium term. Thank you for talking to us this morning.